Welcome to a Truthscript Tuesday evening. I trust it's a good evening wherever you are. The fall air is just wonderful where I am. I love this time of year. It's odd because in the spring, when it gets warmer, you love it, but you also love it when it gets cold. In the winter and the summer, the extremes, maybe not as much, but those transitional periods are just so great. And I'm at the beginning of one of them here in upstate New York in my office. And hope you are doing well. I have a number of things to tell you about, not just articles. We have some wonderful articles on the website today, but also I wanted to share with you a sneak peek at a new podcast that is going to be coming this month, sponsored by Truthscript. In fact, this may be the last Truthscript Tuesday that you see for a while. So buckle your seatbelt. This is a sneak peek at the American Churchman. All right. Well, there you have it. That's all I'm going to show you for now. There's more coming, obviously, but we're not there yet. We're going to be there soon, though. It's probably going to be this week or next week. It's going to be sometime this month, though. We are going to be launching that, and I'm looking forward. It's not just going to be me. There's someone else who's going to be joining me, and the format's going to change a little bit. So it's not Truthscript Tuesday. It's going to be the American Churchman, and as big as Truthscript gets, that's up to the Lord, but we would love at some point to have some people who are able to do other podcasts. I mean, I think a lot of platforms want that, but my own bandwidth is kind of limited. So I said, I think this is a good idea. I think especially right now when there's a lot of men, we're going to talk about this today on the podcast, but there's a lot of men who are young men, especially, who are, I think, somewhat neglected. They're made out to be the villains in society. They need something to inspire them. And I think a lot of the answers are going to be men actually taking initiative, no matter what problem you're talking about. And so the American Churchman is going to be here for that, to assist with that. So that's coming. But let me just remind everyone, if you want to help Truthscript, we have a lot of stuff. We are probably doing much more than the capability of myself and some of the other volunteers, and it is volunteers have, but we're really stretching ourselves to do as much as we can. If you want to help us out, you can go to the donate tab, which is at the bottom at truthscript.com. It is 501c3. You can donate there. You can also help us out by writing for us. You can go to publish at the bottom of truthscript.com, and we'd love to publish you if you have something worthwhile saying. And so there's just, there's a lot to say today. Let's see, another announcement. Fundamentals Conference coming up. This is a men's conference. Now just a few weeks. If you're going to get in, you better do it. Upstate New York. You can get all the details at fundamentalsconference.com, including carpooling information. But we have some really great articles, and I'm just going to jump right into it. Let's jump into this book review. This is from Diane Warner. And the book review is entitled The End of Women, How Smashing the Patriarchy Has Destroyed Us by Carrie Gress. She starts off by saying, we have always lived in a dark world. Ever since Eden, that's been our only option. As a result, humans have understandably sought ways to make this darkness more bearable. But because the darkness has entered our minds and hearts, all too often our understanding of the way forward has brought even darker results. And in this book, The End of Women, or Woman, How Smashing the Patriarchy Has Destroyed Us, Carrie Gress provides a disturbing case study of this process. As many others, she once assumed feminism began as a worthy cause, genuinely seeking opportunities and privileges for women that made sense. Things like giving them the right to vote or improving their access to education. It was only after that, during feminism's second wave, that the more radical ideas were thought to have hijacked its once benign goals, transforming it into something quite different. However, as she probed more deeply into what actually underlies all of feminism, Gress learned two significant things. First, she discovered that the vision of the earliest feminist writers was unlike what she had presumed. Second, she realized that even in its earliest iterations, feminism embraced a fundamental error. What was that error? Here's a quote. Feminism's failure at its root is its misdiagnosis of what ails women. Feminists have worked hard to mitigate women's suffering by trying to eliminate our vulnerability, but by making us cheap imitations of men and by ignoring our womanhood, setting off in the wrong direction. The prescribed fix can't really fix anything. Instead, it has erased women one slow step at a time. Wow, what that is so profound. And I remember my moment when I started to realize some of these things. I went to the Seneca Falls Museum there. The National Park Service has it. And it is it tells you a lot about feminism, but it connects modern feminism. And at the time, this was like 2012 or something, 2011. I don't really remember. It was somewhere in there. So I guess now I'm speaking into history myself because I'm getting to that point in my own age. But at the time, what was modern feminism? It connects that to 1848, to the Seneca Falls Convention and what happened. And I read some stuff on it and I was just shocked. I just thought, wow, this is not at all what I've been told. Not at all. And so this is a worthwhile, I have not read this particular book, but this is a worthwhile, I think, book to get. Anything that's going to expose that is definitely worthwhile because we need to understand at its root, this was bad. This was something that we swallowed and we never should have. Gress is not the first to credit this inception of feminism to Mary Wollstonecraft's book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, which was published in 1792. Two of its essential messages were that society must be fundamentally restructured away from male hierarchy and that females need to be reclassified to ensure that their dignity is respected. Guys, those are fantasies. You're never going to be able, that's the thing. Like, you can try your best. We're living in, I guess, that world somewhat now, but you're never going to be able to get away from nature. You can try, but it'll end in disaster. And that's, I think, what we're experiencing right now. What Gress discovered through her research was that Wollstonecraft wrote this in reaction to the degrading and even violent aspects of manhood she experienced in her own relationships with men. So often that's the case, isn't it? She was further swayed by the prevailing egalitarian ideas of the French Revolution. A third and perhaps more damaging component of the early feminist wellsprings actually came through the contributions of her daughter and son-in-law. The daughter, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, she wrote Frankenstein, was married to Percy Bysshe Shelley, who was one of England's premier poets and a highly immoral man. Shelley and his wife were caught up in a romanticism of their day, which was vehemently anti-Christian and saw freedom, no matter its expression, as their new creed. If you notice, a lot of these movements, these radical movements, whether it's feminism or other social reform movements, even I've been looking into some of the abolitionists of the 19th century, but you can look at the utopian schemes of transcendentalists and the Oneonta community and communism itself, the woke stuff, whether it's social gospel or the BLM movement, liberation theology, it all just seems to come down to this, doesn't it? It all comes down to what I just read. There's an anti-Christian element to it, even if it comes in the name of Christianity. And it sees freedom, no matter its expression, as their new creed. Freedom, no matter its expression. And so unlimited freedom, even forcing people to pay for things, pay for others' freedom to, as a self-expression, as we see with currently, I don't like the fact that Trump's doing this, but the expansion of sexual actions, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, perversions, how's that? And at the same time, contraception and abortion pills, and with Trump that I just referenced, now the IVF, wanting the government to pay for these things. Like, a lot of this really does come down to, like, you should be able to do what you want to do, and without any inhibitions, like unlimited participation in the free market. And this really also links with liberalism. Like, all these isms seem to have this root. Anyway, The Shelley reading of Genesis 3 makes the serpent the highest authority, Eve next, with Adam last, and God ignored altogether. Oh, that's great. Turning next to first wave feminism in America, Gress found that the popular images of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and especially Susan B. Anthony might actually be misleading. She writes, during their own time, Stanton worked hard to craft the myth that she and Anthony were the first and only pioneers of the women's movement. More specifically, there seemed to have been efforts made to keep what might appear to be unsavory details about these women out of their legacies. For example, Stanton, whom Gress says has long been considered the intellectual engine between the two, with Anthony serving more as her mouthpiece, deliberately dismissed her Christian upbringing, being drawn instead to various aspects of spiritualism. And by the way, this is big in the Seneca Falls Convention. They were doing seances in the basement, as I recall. I mean, this was just part of it. She and others eventually wrote the Women's Bible, whose ideas reflected those promoted in Theosophy, a movement closely tied to various mystics. I'm not going to go over the rest of this article. You can read it if you want. She gets into the fruit of feminism and contending with it, arguing against it. Diane Warner does a great job. She's a great writer, and I just appreciate her work so much. So check it out if you're interested in this kind of thing. And if you haven't signed up for the Truthscript email list, get on our email list, truthscript.com. Get on our email list, and you'll get these in your email inbox. Roy Timpey published an article called The Courage to Offend, and he starts off with Romans 9. It says, as it is written, behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and a rock of offense, and whoever believes on him shall not be ashamed. And he talks about a story. He says there was a county Republican committee electing a chairman, and he went to be a proxy, pick up a proxy from a guy who could not make a meeting. At the time, the issues of the meeting seemed important. When he arrived, Roy says that he was visibly excited. He and his wife were Mormons, and he, not Roy. I guess the he is this gentleman that he picked up. So he and his wife were Mormons, and they had been unable to go on their mission trip between high school and college. He was now retiring and going to go on mission. His enthusiasm was bubbling through as he gave me the proxy. My mind went to 2 John, which says, whosoever abides not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. If there come any unto you and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed, for he that bids him Godspeed is partaker in his evil deeds. And Roy says that he nearly said, I would like to wish you Godspeed on your mission, but I cannot. You are preaching a false Christ, a fictional brother of Lucifer, not the divine person of the Trinity. Can you imagine saying this to someone? Some of you can. Some of you, though, have a hard time, and I'm counted among them. I want to be amiable, if you can believe it. I know. I have another podcast, Conversations That Matter, and I do offend people, but I would love to get along with people, right? And if I have a fault in one of these directions, I think I'm probably not as outspoken sometimes as I should be when it comes to people I interact with in my life. And I think that probably goes for a lot of us. And it's a hard thing sometimes because you have to balance a number of different things. It takes prudence and wisdom, but we are called to offend at times. And that's what happened here. So he says this, and he said, I was careful not to encourage him, but took his proxy and departed. That night he died in a house fire. Oh my goodness. His wife escaped, but he was trapped in the bathroom. His body was found in the bathtub where he had taken refuge. Had I spoken with him, it likely would have been his last chance to hear the gospel before entering eternity. Oh my goodness. Perhaps he could have reflected on our conversation while he was sheltered in the tub, wondering why Providence was not blessing his mission. Wow. That's a sobering story. So he talks about another opportunity to offend. And at a funeral. I'm not going to read for you that whole story, but it's with family. And he said that Roy says that he decided to share the gospel because he didn't think that, he actually shared the gospel, it sounds like twice here at a funeral. And then he talked to the priest who was overseeing it. If I speak, I will be contradicting some of the canons of the Council of Trent. The priest just gave a little isn't that like a typical Catholic priest? not all of them, but many of them, whatever. They're okay with you sharing something like that. So he talks about this. Oh, this is great. This is something. I hope people are watching this because this is something that Roy came up with. He showed me this because he was at the men's retreat and he had this idea. Actually, I think he brought it, if I'm not mistaken. I think I saw it. So this is a little device that he made, and it's an illustration. It's an illustration of the gospel, right? So it's got a weight. So on one end you have sin, and it tips the balance, right? And then if someone says, "Well, I do some good things. I volunteer at the fire department," you put a feather there, right? And sin is still outweighing whatever that is. In fact, though, then you find out our righteousness are filthy rags. So actually, the feather contributes to the sin. This is such a great, but the righteousness of Christ weighs more than all of it. And it's such a, I mean, it's so simple, but it's very much a, I don't know, just it's a visual is what it is. And the sin, when the righteousness of Christ enters the equation, when you put your faith in him, sin is nailed to the cross. It's no longer even part of the equation anymore. God doesn't see you like that. So anyway, it's a good gospel presentation. This is great. I'm glad Roy Timpey wrote this, and this is something to share around. I'm wondering if he could patent this. If there isn't a link for where to buy one, but we need one. We really do. Okay. Next is a long piece. I don't have the time to read all of this, but this is really a important and worthwhile piece. And this is why Truthscript exists in part, because other Christian websites aren't going to take this. Let's just be honest. They're just not. They're not going to they'll shy away from this kind of thing, unfortunately. Earl Starbuck wrote a piece called Robert E. Lee, the Marvel Christian Man. And Earl Starbuck is, let's see, I want to make sure I'm not saying anything outside of what he once said. Okay, independent historian from Tennessee. Okay, it does say what I was going to say, and a doctoral student in history. He is a student of history, and he does good writing. And he's a young guy, but he wrote this in response to the Witherspoon Institute's journal, Public Discourse. Okay, so they have a journal, and of course they're going to publish this in their journal. Like, why wouldn't they, right? Like, this is just this is how it works. This is the kind of thing that you can publish and get accolades. And if you ever were to contradict it, you might be blacklisted or even suffer repercussions. But Earl is not afraid of that. So the Witherspoon Institute published a piece by John F. Doherty entitled Propriety Without Principle, The Cautionary Tale of Robert E. Lee, citing Alan C. Golzo's 2021 biography of Lee. I would not ever recommend anyone read Alan Golzo on that stuff, in my opinion. Yes, I've read Golzo. I probably should just stay away from that. Focus on the article. He is platformed in the Gospel Coalition and in so many other Christian places for his knowledge of the Civil War and that kind of thing. But I don't find that he's very compelling or balanced in his approach to this. Anyway, Doherty paints Robert E. Lee as an irreligious hypocrite of weak moral fiber whose virtues were apparent rather than real. So because of his moral deficiency, Lee, who had daddy issues apparently, right, this psychological reading of these people, was eventually swept along by the treasonous flood of rebellion sentiment in Virginia. Lee thus serves as a warning to people who wish to be genuinely, not just apparently, virtuous. Okay, so, I mean, this is part of the whole, like, ripping down all of our heroes and that kind of thing. So he goes through the supposed sin and starts off saying that there was a superficial, good qualities to Lee, but Lee was no abolitionist, and he did not believe in gradual emancipation. He did believe in gradual emancipation, trusting that God would end slavery in his own time. Until then, he wrote to Mrs. Lee, the abolitionists should rely on the moral means and suasion, because emancipation will sooner result from the mild and melting influence of Christianity than the storms and tempests of fiery controversy. When he wrote these words, Lee probably had in the back of his mind the memories of Nat Turner's rebellion, stirred up to violence by abolitionist pamphlets, which urged slaves to rise up and kill their masters. Nat Turner and his followers rampaged through Southampton County, Virginia, killing over 50 people. They began by killing 5 people in their beds, including a baby taken from its crib and beaten to death against a brick fireplace. That hits me right now, to be honest. That's really... In 1859, John Brown's abolitionist raid on Harper's Ferry proved Lee right. The first person killed by Brown's gang was Hayward Shepard, a free black man who worked as a baggage handler for the B&O Railroad. Shepard left behind a widow and 5 children. When the options for emancipation were gradual and peaceful or immediate and violent, not merely violent, but soaked in the blood of innocence, is it any wonder that Lee preferred the former solution? So he goes, this is kind of the whole style of this piece. He goes piece by piece and said, okay, here's the accusation. Here's the reality. Here's why Lee would have. So Lee is a moral monster because he wasn't an immediate abolitionist. Well, look at the circumstances and look what he actually said about it. Doherty declares that Lee had runaway slaves whipped with exceptional violence. This is such an interesting claim to me. This claim was popularized by Elizabeth Brown Pryor in her book, Reading the Man. Prior to Pryor's book, that's a great sentence, historians discounted these stories because there was no proof to support them and because Lee repeatedly denied the claims. Unsubstantiated accusations published by hostile tabloids do not constitute evidence. I was just talking to someone earlier this week, or last week, I guess, who did a podcast where they wanted to pick me apart and some of the things I've said on this topic. And they brought this up that, well, Lee was abusive to his slaves. And he said, the guy said, well, you're not going to believe that, though. You're going to discount that. And I'm like, it's not that I'm going to discount it. It's that it has to be, there's no proof there. This is no one took it seriously at the time, except some radical abolitionists who hated everything about Lee in the South and all of that. But it hasn't been taken seriously throughout time until very recently, when there's all of a sudden this motivation to take down his statue and that kind of thing. Doherty insists that Lee sided with Virginia out of a selfish desire to save his family's lands in Northern Virginia. That's Lee's decision was based not on what justice dictated, but on what was most convenient to his family. This is actually a lot of speculation, I think. In arguing that Lee sided with Virginia for personal gain, Doherty has overlooked a vitally important detail. Lee, a career soldier, his entire life chose Virginia over the U.S. government 2 days after being offered command of what would become the Union Army of the Potomac, a command which would have brought him with it promotion to Major General. Military glory, high rank, fame, and success were all within grasp. This is such a silly thing to say about Lee. He really was offered, even after the war, he was so respected. Some people thought he could have run for president. He was that respected. But he had a devotion to his state. He went back to Washington, and now it's called Washington and Lee. And he wanted to train young men how to be men and to deal with the new world that they were inheriting. And I just think that there's so much good things to say. And to use speculation, to use unreliable sources, to tarnish the man's character, there's something that you have to have wrong with yourself. And I think these guys, Robert E. Lee's just one of them, but guys from, whether you're talking about the reformers, founding fathers, people that we've revered, these are betters in so many ways. And when you have these guys who you would never know their name except for the fact that, they rip on these guys, it really speaks more about them than it does the men that they rip on. I'm going to skip ahead here. We don't have time to go over this whole thing, but he talks about gentlemanly morality in Lee's life. And he brings in a lot of scripture, how devout he was as a Christian. This is a really good piece by Earl. And he quotes Dwight D. Eisenhower and what he said about Lee. I mean, Lee was kind of universally revered. So let's go to the next article. If you want to read more about that, check it out. The Glory of Man, the Weaker Vessel by Dan Lowing. And this starts out, I was at an intersection recently, observing a couple crossing the road after having just left the Dollar General. Wonder where he was. They were both carrying groceries, but I couldn't help but notice how much less the man was carrying. The woman had more bags and looked heavier. This is not the way. Something else I've noticed is the tremendous resurgence of interest in manhood and womanhood. With this has come much error and faulty advice. You better believe it. While I am so glad the conversation is being had, sometimes bad direction is worse than ignorance. So he gives some practical advice for sincere young men. He says, if you're walking down the stairs, your wife should be behind you. If you're walking up the stairs, your wife should be in front of you. If you're walking down the sidewalk, you should be between her and the road. If you have kids with you, your wife should not be pushing the stroller and walking the dog while you linger behind. If a stranger is approaching, you should be between her and the potential threat. And if you're walking in the store, she should be in the car or at least away from your wallet. Just kidding. So this is, these are things that used to be just ingrained. You were taught this growing up in the United States. We've lost them. And it's time to regain some of them because there were reasons for them. I do this with my own wife. I walk in between her and the street generally. I push the stroller unless she really wants to. I carry the stuff. I mean, these are just basic chivalry, right? None of this is to say you're in sin if you're not doing this, though you may be. And please don't hear what I'm not saying, but rather attend to what I am. I want you men to have a state of mind, one that says I'm the protector. It's my life before hers. If anyone dies, it's me. If anyone gets hurt, it's me. We are not equal. She is the more precious, but more important than I am. Boy, this used to be taught, and I think feminism has somewhat destroyed it. He goes on and talks about scripture, how we're supposed to lay down our life the way Christ did for the church. That's what we do for our wives, and exhorts everyone to be a man. This is a great piece. And man, Truthscript is really putting out some good stuff. I just highly encourage you to sign up for the email, to read Truthscript, and also to support us. If you can support us, I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there who, and there's a lot of good things to support, but I know there's a lot of people out there who have ministries that they used to support that they can't anymore. And if Truthscript is one of these ministries that you can support, then please consider doing so. If you're not supporting another ministry or something. All right. Let's get into this last one by Charles Jacoby, A Father's Fire. I'm probably not going to do this all justice because of time, but he talks about how fatherhood changes you, and I'm experiencing that myself. Not having kids when you want kids can change you. Having kids also changes you. Every experience does, but having kids is a responsibility. It makes you realize how precious your time is. Well, I'm talking about myself. I should be talking about what Charles has to say here. So he says fatherhood changes you. It's one of the most radical emotional shifts I've ever experienced. You are still the same person, but your emotional capacity amplifies thrice over. Young single men are commonly known to society for their fire, their burning hunger for success, their preternatural ability to outlabor, and their incredible capacity of vigor. This all turns out to be a smolder compared to the fire of fatherhood. A father's love for their children is a grand inferno, one that rages at the slightest sense of a threat to their offspring. He says fatherhood is exactly that. You are set on fire for your children. Your emotions broaden and you intensify. While protective rage can light at any second, so too does fatherhood balm you. I'm going to skip ahead here. He gives the example of a towering knight and this archetype that we look to. He says there's hope. It seems to me that the good Lord's fatherly christening provides us dads with a soul that is capable of nearly anything when our children are at stake. A young buck may be able to outwork you, Dad, when you both clock in tomorrow. But when it gets really tough, things are falling apart and showing up isn't as easy as it once was, will he? Lord knows Dad will. Dad has no choice. He is set on fire. It's so true. Dads just are going to keep going. And in the wilderness where you have seen how the Lord your God carried you as a man carries his son all the way that you went until you came to this place. Deuteronomy 131. Family's relying on you, so be a man. All right. Those are the articles for Truthscript. For men, second to last call. Last call is going to be real soon, though. I mean, you might as well be last call. Sign up, fundamentalsconference.com if you want to come to the retreat. And if you have, I forgot. I knew I was forgetting something. Here it is. I think I already mentioned this, but it is solidified now. We have a schedule for, and I will announce a few of the speakers, not all of them, but a few of them now, for the last weekend of April, which is the 24th and 25th. of April 2025, we have a conference that's going to be near Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it's going to be on the American founding, the American heritage. So it's Christianity and the founding and the American founding. That's the conference. You've never been to a conference like this. This is going to focus on different denominations and Christian traditions and really give you a history lesson in what made America the way it was from a Christian understanding, because we are an Anglo-Protestant culture. And so we are going to talk about Presbyterianism and Anglicanism and Baptists and maybe Methodists. We'll see. I don't want to leave anyone out, but I don't have someone covering the Methodists yet. But we're going to talk about all those things. We're going to talk about, we have some special topics. I can confirm, though, Sean McGowan and also Zachary Garris are going to be there. I can confirm Sam Smith from Liberty University has agreed to come. And we have some others that are waiting in the wings, and I will let you know where to sign up and all the other details once I have them. But that's all going to come together real soon. I'm excited about it. This is something Truthscript's doing. And this is where, when you contribute to Truthscript, some of that money goes to things like this, goes to events like this. And we want to do more of them. So that said, God bless. Hope you all have a good evening. Bye now.